Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome, very warm welcome to our 8th episode of EDspresso Café. Cheers. It's great to have you here, Rob.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. With us this afternoon, we have Robert Faltermeyer. He is the Director of Innovation at JP Boys High School, which happens to be the school where my dad went. So we've got a very special connection there in terms of the school. And Robert is just an incredible innovator and a really passionate educator. So I'm really, really pleased that I get to chat and spend this afternoon with Robert, just an all-round great guy. So maybe as we start off, I'd love to hear from you. What is it that inspires you as a teacher? Like, you've done such amazing things. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
I'd probably say that number one inspiration is basically wanting to actually help others. It's always something that I've always felt is important to actually give back, but more specifically in helping long-term and nurturing our future, which is our students, so that they can be best prepared to help other people around them. And fundamentally, that comes down to education. I mean, so I struggled a little bit at school. I had a bit of a learning difficulty, and I know what I had with. And I've seen a lot of other kids who've got some really amazing ideas, but they may be struggling a little bit in the traditional sense. So trying to think differently, trying to teach differently so that they can add value to themselves and society, I think is part of what drives me. So that, I mean, it might sound airy-fairy, but just to make the world a better place. And if I can play a small role in that, that's what inspires me.
And I think so many of our students, like, it's just so true that the system just doesn't work for them, right? That they can't learn in the way we want them to learn. And like we are, the system is not designed to bring out the best in every child, right? So when you were a student, like, what were some of the things that your teachers did that you feel like really connected with you and really kind of helped you learn?
Oh, that's an easy one. I mean, I think everybody has a favorite teacher or a favorite subject, and it comes down, I suppose, not so much to the subject, but the individual teacher. And it comes down to how engaging they are. And what I've sort of developed as a philosophy over time is the ability to tell stories. If you can make it engaging, if you can tell a story, if you can grab the attention of someone else, you can have an impact on them, maybe feel something or maybe make them learn something. I mean, I've got examples when I was having maths where I was downright boring sometimes, and sometimes it was uplifting, and it came down to the engagement and just the ability to tell a story, even if the story won't necessarily make sense. For example, maths, I think one of my best sort of examples was we had a maths teacher who brought stories into maths. And I remember that maths lesson all today, and it was about the X and the Y axis. And he brought in the whole idea of battleships, and he gave us a bit of a story about a naval battle. And then we emulated the battle by playing battleships in class. We're using the X and Y axis to teach us how that works. And that was amazing. And it's just something simple, numbers, maths, but bringing a story into it. And that for me is something that stands out. I mean, so I'm a history teacher, so I suppose my subject lends itself to stories a little bit more. But being able to tell a story, being able to get somebody to be excited, I think is what's key. And I think it's also fundamentally to being a human. I mean, everybody will pay overpriced popcorn for a movie, or they'll binge watch on Netflix because they like a story. So if you can bring, so if you can bring a story into your education or something, then I think you're on the right track. And I don't think it really matters what subject you teach. If you can bring in something that can make a difference for a student who maybe learns a bit differently, as you said, because they can see or hear or engage somewhere.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally, stories can, like you said, that human element, they connect with us on an emotional level. And I think sometimes we underestimate the importance of our emotions when it comes to learning. So can you give me some specific examples of how you've drawn this idea of storytelling? And maybe, I know you use quite a bit of tech in your teaching and learning, maybe how you combine storytelling and tech in your class specifically?
So one of the key things, I mean, if I'm taking history as an example, history happens in places. They happen in physical places, and sometimes those physical places have an impact on our history. So rather than just reading out from a textbook, like who did what, who killed who, and what happened when and how that happens, is set the scene like a play or in a movie. Like take them on Google Earth, get them to visit the actual place where this happens. Get them to have an understanding how the seasons work. So if we use Google Earth, for instance, or we use Google Expeditions, we can visit places and we can immerse the students in the place where history actually happened. And you can narrate along things happening, and you can sort of give them an understanding visually of why this has an impact. I mean, one example that comes to mind is grade 11 history when we teach the Russian Revolution. And you have this concept of general winter is like the biggest enemy, and have an understanding how the Russian winter and the vastness of Russia actually had an impact on the history that we deal with, whether it's the Russian Civil War or the Russian Revolution or anything like that. Visiting these places and visiting like a Siberian tundra area in a VR goggles that we get our students to visit or to see, measure the distances. The students then start to get an understanding of how these places impacted our history. Or, for example, we were doing something with American civil rights, and you can visit the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and see the view that Martin Luther King had. See pictures, download videos, turn them into 3D images, and get the student to try and feel the emotion or the passion that was happening at that time. I mean, the one thing you touched a little bit on it is that this idea about the emotional element. I mean, humans are an emotional species, and if we can tap into that somehow, that creates a bigger imprint. So if we can bring these elements in using technology to help impact that emotional side, it then sinks in a little bit better with our students.
Absolutely, and I think there are just so many great apps and tools out there. I mean, you've mentioned Google Earth, you mentioned Google Expeditions, and Google is actually busy moving all the content that was in Google Expeditions over into Google Arts and Culture. And that's actually our Purple ZA app of the week this week is Google Arts and Culture. So I think, and I mean, there are just so many other ways that we can travel the world without leaving the classroom. And I think especially in these times when travel is so limited, to be able to show, to take our students places, both places that existed in the past, places that exist in the present, but I mean, there are just so many different ways of using it. So if you are watching Robert's story of how he uses VR and Google Cardboard and Google Tour Builder is at purpleza.co.za/stories. So that's live there for you to go and have a look at and peruse and kind of check out. And if you have any questions for Robert, feel free to pop them in the chat. And then, so Rob, you teach history, right? So I understand how that makes sense in terms of place-based learning, being able to take students to place, connecting with a place. But how have you seen this used? And I know you do some EdTech coaching. So how have you seen this used in other subjects, both with other tools or this idea of storytelling, this idea of place-based learning? Like, how does it apply, for instance, if I'm a biology teacher? What does that have to do with story and place?
Yeah, so just to go back a little bit, Google Arts and Culture is an amazing app, and that's one of my go-tos in the example. So you alluded to a little bit. So part of my role is to help coach and motivate other staff at JEPI here to teach innovatively and to think differently. So effectively, there are a number of tools out there that you can actually use. One of the really cool ones that we've done in some other subjects, for English in particular, there's something called Google Lit Trips, which is pre-built tours based on Google Earth, but it places themselves in what I would imagine for most schools are set works that they do. And so you have a pre-built story where you as a teacher, one of the things I'm passionate about is saving time for teachers and sharing amongst each other. And some teachers have made some really amazing literature chips that are based on set work novels where you can visit the places and they say, this happens in this part of the book, that happens here, this mountain has an impact on this character, or whatever the case might be whether it's being Macbeth. So we've done that for our English classes when they're doing Macbeth, pre-building, visiting the sites.
Yeah, now that you're talking about that, that also reminds me of Google My Maps, which is kind of the My Maps, not maps, guys, if you're listening, not the same thing that gets you to like where you need to go.
Different maps.
But Google My Maps allows students to create. So they can actually add pins to locations, add information to those pins, and kind of retell stories that are place-based in nature as a way of demonstrating learning. So kind of pinpointing points of historical significance or points of residence or points of location of, we're talking about biology. So where are the different plant species located, different biomes, adding images, adding audio even and video in those pins. And now in Google Earth, there's Earth creation tools. So I can kind of see how Google started it with My Maps. And now when you go into Google Earth, you can actually create your own 3D virtual voyage. So there's a whole bunch of people voyages, and now you can create your own. And I just think like it's so great to be able to take students out of the class and for them to see and kind of consume, and then to use those exact same tools for them to create and like demonstrate their understanding. It's like the possibilities are absolutely phenomenal.
No, exactly. I mean, you talked a bit about biology, but some of the things that we've done in history, biology, as well as English and life science is we've actually used these tools to actually do formal assessments, trying to think a little bit differently, where there's actually a section on marking creativity, trying to think outside the box, where, okay, you're looking at a biome, let's find a place on the planet, let's build these little points, you do research, you highlight a well-known place that meets X requirement or whatever requirement when it comes to life science, and then that gets submitted and it gets marked digitally. So we're teaching them 21st century skills as well as research skills, but using the tools for the students to tell a story. And funny enough,
it's so much more relevant. Like I think when we were, like at school, now you make a brochure or a poster. Like nobody, just like when last did you read a brochure? I don't know, like maybe the one sitting in the doctor's office, but you wouldn't touch it because, COVID. So like I think the fact that our students can create and demonstrate their understanding with digital media is just really amazing. And I think one of the things that it does is it makes, learning that could be really kind of content heavy and sort of difficult to plow through. It really makes it stick for the students, I think. I mean, that's pretty good ideas. And even I think like, we've got virtual reality and you can get these really cheap, like $100. It's not like this expensive thing anymore. I love how technology becomes more and more accessible over time. Virtual reality goggles and a phone, and there it goes. And you can, take your students on a tour. But then also, augmented reality where you can now all of a sudden have a globe or have a planet or have an animal or have a dinosaur, augment the reality that you're in and kind of be sitting on whatever's in front of you. And I mean, Google Arts and Culture's got like over 2,000 different AR tours and VR tours and all of that. But I just think it really does help, I think, for us to connect with students who wouldn't necessarily connect with, a kind of a lifeless textbook or a slide on the screen,
So one of the best positive feedbacks I ever got from a student going back to life science was using augmented reality for a cell. Where in the textbook, it was a two-dimensional picture trying to represent a three-dimensional thing. And then the students used their phones and they got to go inside the cell. And you can see for some students, the translation from a 2D object to make it appear 3D in their mind was just not happening. And now they see it in 3D and now it makes sense. And the biggest reward, other than, that the kid's getting a better mark, is just the look on their face of, I get it. I now understand it is amazing. And there's also one other benefit to all this, which I don't think we actually talk enough about, is the benefit to you as the teacher. Because if you become passionate, if you become excited, and you become less bored and teaching the same old content, that energy is going to steamroll into your students. So it's only going to have a positive effect. And I think we need to break out of the mold of, we've got to try some risks. We've got to just see what happens and just see how it goes in class and emulate these things we want the students to be ready for in the future. But if you can have fun doing this, your students are, and fun doesn't necessarily equal lack of work ethic. It probably in some cases, if done right, increases an advancement of work ethic and more drive.
Totally, absolutely. And I think, things like giving students choice in what they're exploring, as an introduction to a topic, or, having them explain what they've seen in virtual reality or augmented reality, using something great like a visible thinking routine or a thinking map to kind of consolidate their understanding, or like, okay, now you've seen this thing in 3D, okay, now drag and drop the labels onto that object. It really just does connect with the learning so much and makes the learning so much more powerful. I fully agree with you, Rob. So obviously you've come quite a long way in your own journey with kind of innovative learning design and with tech, and we're never done. So there's always obviously
it's a journey.
Yes, totally. Ironically, since we're talking about place-based learning, but I think if you consider sort of the place that you're at now in your journey and where you've come from, and maybe other people who are watching the story, they've kind of landed on our site, or they're doing one of our Purple ZA courses. We actually have a whole course on place-based learning where you can earn your Captain Planet badge. It's quite cool. So maybe they're watching this and they're going, oh my goodness, I don't know. This all seems very out there to me, and I don't really know how do I get to this point, and kind of what. Yeah, I guess I'm just asking what guidance or advice you'd have for people who are sort of just getting started on this tech journey and looking at things like AR and VR and that kind of stuff.
So I think the biggest thing is, one, be willing to take a risk. I mean, part of where we're going with 21st century education is skills-based stuff. And we want to emulate as teachers what we want our students to be prepared for going forward. I'm not one for buzzwords, but like the whole idea of failing forward or failing upwards or giving a go. I think as teachers, sometimes we're so scared of not making a mistake in class, and we're the fountain of all knowledge, and that unfortunately the world is changing a little bit. But just try something different in your class. Tell a story, and it's okay if it goes pear-shaped. Trust me, I've been there. I've had some. I put so much effort in, and it went terrible. Or then I tried something. This is not going to fly, and it's up there, and the kids can't stop raving about it. It's okay. I think number one, give it a go. See where it goes. And if you're feeling it's a little bit airy-fairy, how do I do that? How does it actually justify as being learning? I think part of the sort of process to sort of start with, and this is something I've grown in my journey, is more about the pedagogy. Start with a goal. What is this going to try to achieve? What is it that we are going to try and do differently? What is it we want the students to get across? What is the tech going to do differently? What am I hoping the tech is going to do? Give it some thought. Think, what is it going to do? Don't just replace a video with now everybody watches it on their phones. What's the reasoning behind that? What is that going to add? How is that going to improve a particular situation? So I think for anybody starting out now, and I wish I had this advice, was to start, what is it? Why are you doing it differently? What is it that you want to achieve? And it's okay if it's a small step, because eventually all these small steps lead to a bigger shift and a bigger change for everybody.
They really do. Thanks, Rob. I think that's incredibly sound advice. We often talk and refer back to Simon Sinek's golden circle with, starting with the why and then thinking about the how and then the what am I going to do. And then, of course, when we fail, understand that what we have the opportunity to do is model growth mindset for our students. Correct. To talk about how we deal with failure. And really model what being a lifelong learner, which is another one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around, but really model what that looks like. So, if you wanted to explore a little bit more about how place-based learning and technology can help with content-heavy subjects like your geographies and your histories and your biologies and all of those, we have a webinar coming up this Friday, actually, at 3:00 in the afternoon. You can come and join some of the most inspired teachers in South Africa, and we're going to be looking at how to stop the content cram. So it would be lovely to have you learn with us. If you happen to catch this episode this week, please pop to bit.ly/DeepFixFridays and come and join us. But other than that, Rob, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise and for sharing your ZA Edu story with us. We are really, really excited that our ZA Edu stories are now live on our website. And we are looking for more stories of innovation, just like yours. I'm talking to you, person watching. You do good stuff in your classroom. Pop over and fill in the form and come and share your story with us. We would love to continue to grow this tribe of innovative educators in South Africa. But Rob, thank you very, very much. So I think everybody will say goodbye until next time. Keep failing forward.
Yes. Keep telling stories.
Cheers.
Cheers.